take the lead. Go ahead.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order at 1:09. Sherry sent out an agenda to everyone as well as documents. Sherry, do you mind doing a screen sharing, starting with the first agenda item, which is the 2-page New York City footage policy that we're going to review?
Yeah.
It is in the shared folder that you sent out.
Okay, let me try to get on there.
Hey, Bill. One thing too, just to kind of overview this meeting, Rob and I talked yesterday. We want to give body camera policy its due time, but we also recognize that we as a committee have been working on it for quite some time. Having a new sheriff come in does start some things over, and we realize that. But our intention is to kind of get through body camera policy items. We as a committee make whatever recommendations we're going to make to the sheriff, and then kind of punt it off to his office to, work with our recommendations in whichever way he sees fit, and maybe come back to the committee with, a draft policy, and then move on next to the citizen review panel. Sheriff Krepp.
Trying to get this thing to work for you, Tristia, but so I just want to start out by saying we're looking into about 40 different policies throughout the state. We contacted New York State Sheriff's Association. A lot of the information that I'm reviewing, New York City, and then I'm getting some information from Atlanta and Baltimore, and I saw that there was a citizen review panel board, citizen review board quarterly report from Syracuse. I'm not sure the totality that the past administration spoke on this, but these are all municipalities. They answer to a quandary of different entities, where the sheriff's office is unique because they answer to the sheriff and the sheriff alone. So we're looking at sheriff's policies throughout the state. And we're going to mirror it more off of what other sheriff's offices are doing based on the similarities in our work. We're a public safety entity, which, we have we wear a lot of different hats, I'll say. So I think it's more apt that we look at these policies, and I'll be happy to get those. I just received them in the email yesterday, so I really haven't had a lot of time to review these policies, but I started reviewing Albany's today, and it's very in-depth. And I can get some of these policies out to the panel once I get the release from the other sheriff's agencies, if that's acceptable.
Thank you, Sheriff. So am I understanding you correctly that instead of reviewing the New York City policy, it was under the prior that it was agreed the New York City policy was a good model to kind of start with and then make edits to? Am I understanding correctly that you're looking to find a model policy of another sheriff's office that would be kind of where we would start?
I think it would be more applicable to do that. I mean, New York City and Columbia County are two totally different entities. I mean, we're talking about, 40,000 police officers compared to, our 170 sworn employees. Actually, that's civilians and sworn officers here. So I think there's a lot of difference in the two. We don't have
So my sense on that then is, if that's where I understand that we as a panel are going to make recommendations. It's up to the sheriff's department to make the final determination. But I'm fine with staying on here as long as possible, but I also don't want to stay on here and waste time. So if you need some more time to submit, let's say you find 10 sheriff policies. This is what I'm trying to understand. You're going to review as many as you can find. Let's say you find 5 that you really like, and then you're going to sort of weed it down to 1 or 2 that you're going to submit to the committee here that we can also review at that point. And then we can have a better conversation, because otherwise, we're going to just all sit around here and have a conversation about naught. So that's kind of my sense on this at this point. If you're not ready to have that conversation, and if we're going to recommend something that's completely out of the reality of what we could possibly get, then what's the point? We might as well try to all get on a similar page. I realize we're not going to get on the same page, but I don't want to, have that conversation if you're really not ready to have it, Sheriff. And that's what it sounds like, only because you need a little more time. So I would
Yeah,
think next month you would have something to us at least a week before the next committee meeting so that we could review that and we can all have a conversation that makes sense. Dave, you had a question?
Oh, yes, I did. Sorry, I didn't raise my hand before. I'm just wondering what how camera policies might differ from a small force versus a large force. I'm not sure I understand the connection, particularly when we're talking about the release of footage. I've been a citizen of this small community as well as New York City, and I don't see much difference in what I'd be interested in as a citizen in terms of release policy.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. That's a good question, but unless you've been a police officer in both those entities, I think it would be kind of hard, especially an administrator, it'd be kind of hard to grasp that difference. One of them is money. All this stuff takes money, takes time. We have one officer here who's doing our redaction, and I think we talked about this last time. The redaction takes time. I reviewed what Tristia had put out. And, we're talking about putting things in writing about why we redacted things and so on and so forth. And it takes several days just to do a 1-hour video for a traffic stop to redact the footage. Now you're talking about critical incidents, which can be 3 or 4 hours long. The body cam is going to run until the body cam battery runs out and a critical incident, obviously, or until they're no longer on scene. And then in some instances, it's going to continue to run. So this could take a lot longer than 30 days just to do the redaction, and then to ask to have a written confirmation or written documentation of every single redaction that the officer made in the video footage is going to be extremely time consuming. And that's one of the reasons we just don't have the resources, the money, or the ability to make these time parameters work for our agency in a critical incident.
Sheriff, so you're saying that maybe in New York City may have a whole division that deals with that, as opposed to what we have.
Exactly, Supervisor Lagoni. Not only is it going to be a whole division, but they're also going to have the computer programs to do partial redaction. And then, of course, it needs to be reviewed, and it needs to be reviewed by administration. And, we don't have that manpower here in order to do that, especially this time and point where our numbers are extremely low and we're, like the Yankees in a rebuilding year. There's a lot of other issues we have that are ongoing, and as I'm sure Supervisor Hoatling and Supervisor Lagonia can vouch for this. We're working with a ton of different agencies with creating a community network through mental health, through DSS, through programs with the jail. We're trying to implement all these to be more community oriented, to be more transparent, to be more part of the community. So we're there. This is multi-layered, and police reform is just part of that plan.
So, Sheriff, if I can kind of reiterate what Supervisor Lagonia said, because I agree, I don't want to waste anybody's time. I think it's important that this committee have, some recommendations to your office. At the end of the day, policy is the purview of the sheriff's office. But instead of us working with a model policy that you don't think is relevant, is it realistic, like Supervisor Lagonia said, between now and 3 weeks from now, a week before our next meeting, that you get us 1, 2, 5, however many sample policies you find that you think could be good models or could be somehow combined together, that we then as a committee can review, so that at the next meeting we can have discussion, maybe come to some, recommendations to then, pass along to you. That's my first question. And my second question, to dovetail on that, are we talking just about a footage release policy, or are we talking also about some of these other policies that we as a committee have been looking at, such as your body camera policy as a whole, the amount of look back time, or are we just for now looking at the footage release policy? So those are two kind of related questions.
What I've been able to gather was about, again, 40 policies throughout New York State for body cameras. And, just today I was able to review Albany's, which is, again, pretty in-depth, and it's a great policy. Sheriff Apple, really put a nice policy together, and, that would be more suited than obviously New York City, but it's obviously Albany. which is, our largest sheriff's office probably within the state with a multitude of different divisions. So, counties such as Lewis County, Washington County, smaller counties that kind of mirror our police presence, corrections presence, and office in totality would probably be something more suitable. But I would be more than happy to get as many of these to you as quickly as I possibly can with the release from the other sheriffs, and I'll make that a priority amongst a few of the other programs we're doing to get those releases for you within a couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
So just a quick a response on that. I don't think that this committee, just so we're all on the same page, is going to want 40 policies. I think we're going to want it drummed down to the 5 or 6 or 8 that you have some sense of that they could work. It doesn't mean that this committee is going to agree with that or not, but
Sure.
At least we'll have a platform to start with, as opposed to us starting to go. Otherwise, I just think we're spinning our wheels here. And unfortunately, I know there's been a lot of work done by this committee, but we have a new sheriff, and the new sheriff has a lot of input, and we have to give him the opportunity. It's a big undertaking. He started in January, and we have to give him an opportunity to get his feet under him and get something to us that makes sense. I also don't want this to keep going on for months and months and months. So I think if we can all agree that next month we'll have something much more reasonable, we could spend the whole time on that, maybe come to a conclusion at the end. At least we can get 1 item or 2 items off our plate. I just think that's a good approach here. Michael, you have a question? You're muted, Michael.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
So I'm totally fine with waiting to the next meeting and give the sheriff and the sheriff's office time to do more research about good policies. I want to give a little bit of background about how we got to these model policies. We started with some basic recommendations, which was in extreme circumstances, we're going to want to have some system where the body cameras are providing checks and balances that give the public some sense of closure in critical incidents. And as we went through these things, there was some pushback that it would be illegal or impossible to do any of these recommendations. So the way we got to the model policies was here, it's obviously not illegal to do these things. Many sheriff's departments in New York State and around the country do, or police departments do these kinds of things. So it is an option, and here's a way to go. But by all means, I think it's helpful to hear from other sheriff's departments specifically about, who are doing county level law enforcement.
Bill?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I absolutely agree with the sheriff on looking at other municipalities that really mirror our size, and I thought that's the kind of path we should have been taking from the beginning. One question I had though is not only Supervisor Holton brought this up, but not only are we talking about just this policy, or are we talking about moving forward with all other discussions is my concern. And the other thing is, now that we know that that's kind of the scheme that we're going to be in, well, there's 62 counties in New York State. There's 42 counties that are rural, but there's only about 10 counties that actually mirror our size of 60,000 or more. So, we could just, if we're going to look at policies, we can just eliminate it and come down to those 10 counties right now. And how many of those 10 counties actually have policies that we would want to look at? So that's just some food for thought.
Thanks, Bill. And yeah, just to reiterate what Supervisor Chimides said, oftentimes, like for example, with the footage release, there was the concerns of, wait a minute, you can't do that. There's laws in place, there's statute, you can't have that type of thing. And so Supervisor Chimides often would go and research to find, and again, not that we have to be New York City or have a policy like New York City, but the argument that we're not allowed to do it or that we legally can't do it was kind of a moot point. And so I think a lot of these policies weren't necessarily looking at what's another county similar to ours, but more to come back at the argument that it can't be done. When I look at New York City's policy, one thing I like about it is it does talk about, prosecution and other things and reasons that it might not be released, which is a very valid point. And so the idea that like you can write a policy that lays out, a time frame and a process, but also has a caveat that, you know, you're not going to, you know, be out of compliance with state statute or other laws that are in place. Bill, was your hand still raised from before, or did you have another thing to say? Oh, okay. So here's I think we're all in agreement that we want to give the sheriff, you know, more time, come back at the body camera in general at the next meeting. One thing that I would like to see happen is us moving to things such as the citizen review panel, which, although we of course want the sheriff's input, that doesn't fall under the sheriff's office. That falls under the chairman and the board of supervisors. And so there's an area where the sheriff's really going to have input that's important, but we're actually going to be coming to the legislative body to adopt, you know, what that panel looks like. And maybe, Rob, you and I should get together outside of the meetings to look at the actual police reform document to see what are the other action items, right? We started with body cameras. We want to continue. Let's give the sheriff the time he needs. But what are some of the other things? And maybe at our next meeting too, we as a committee can discuss kind of an agenda. Here's 10 action items that we as a committee should be working on. What do we want to do first, second, third, fourth? That might be a good discussion as well.
And then, you know, I know it's an agenda item on here, but Tistry and I have not met with the labor attorney yet. We're going to have that. We have that meeting scheduled on March 23rd. So that would also be, you know, an update to the committee as to where we are with that. So, you know, maybe all of those things should happen, and then we will have more productive meetings going forward before we just start, you know, throwing ideas around here. So, not that I want to cut this meeting short right now, because again, I blocked off the time, but I also don't want to see everybody here get exhausted from these meetings and we're not getting anywhere. I think we have to refocus because, you know, we have some new players here and some new thoughts and some new ideas, and I think we'll come to a good conclusion on all of these items. But I do think we should probably, as you said, Tistry, get together, refocus, get the information from the sheriff a week before the next meeting. We'll also have the information from the attorney as far as where we're headed with the union. We can also get that information out to the committee and come to the next meeting a little more focused on. Hopefully the district attorney will be there as well, because I think that's an important part of obviously what we're doing. So
I agree, Rob. And one thing I would ask is for all the committee members, as well as people on this call that aren't committee members, you know, Supervisor Chimidi, Supervisor Mussman, Mr. Zoni, anyone that's interested, I think Rob and I will get together and look at that police document, the reform document, and kind of see what are those action items. But I would encourage all committee members and anyone on this call that's interested to also take a look at that document and kind of pull out some of those to do, you know, needs future work. And that's the point of this committee, so that we can all brainstorm together at our next meeting. You know, if everyone can email me or Sherry kind of what their things are that they see in that document, we can compile a big list and get it out to this committee before the next meeting, and then go through that list and kind of prioritize, you know, what our work plan should be.
I mean, is everybody okay with that thought? It just seems we're a little bit not focused at this point because we're all over the place. I think we should refocus, but I'm happy to put more time in today, whatever the group would like to do. Dave? You're muted, Dave.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Just wanted to say that before, under the old administration, we did have a pretty straightforward focus, and we're working on it. So I think right now it might feel a little scattered, maybe to new members, and I realize that. And of course, as the sheriff said, with the new administration, he's got a long list of things he's got to catch up on, do. There are a lot of changes coming down. So I think we want to make sure he's able to prioritize his work the way he needs to. And I think it's a great idea to refocus our strategies. But up till now, we've been pretty focused on body camera and Ready with the Cab, and we've been working item by item pretty efficiently. And of course, we all have to readjust because of the new administration. I just wanted to ask Tistry real quick, which is the document we should be checking? Do you have the title of it? Because I've got a folder of all the documents from the police reform
Yeah, Sherry, it's on the website. What is it actually called? Police reform. Hang on.
I thought I know the one, but I just wanted to be sure of
It's
the
the,
exact.
it's the final plan, right? Is that what you're
Yeah,
looking for?
That's
Yeah.
what I'm talking about.
Can you just
So it's a
re-forward
draft of the
that to
final plan.
everybody, Sherry, as an individual document? I think it would be helpful.
I'm sorry, what was that, Rob?
Can you just send that as an individual document to
Absolutely.
everybody in the committee? Because I know everybody has folders, but as everybody knows, we're involved in so many different things.
Absolutely. And going into the actual plan, and thinking back, I know, John Rivero was helpful, and when Captain Bray was here as well, and going through the items that actually we had a lot of pending items in that document, of things in the plan that needed to be accomplished. I'm wondering if Sergeant Rivero hasn't gone through that stuff lately or now, or in the future can do that and see if maybe some of these things can be crossed off that list or provided an update as to what has happened with some of those items. Because I have a feeling some of those things that were action items might already be done.
Yeah, I think Captain Rivera,
Great idea, Sherry. Thank you.
he's on the call, right? Did he get off?
I am on the call. Once that gets recirculated, I'd be more than happy to go through that with command staff.
Great, John. Thank you.
That would be up, to the sheriff, obviously, as to if he still wants them the way that they've been implemented, or if there's going to be other action that's going to be taken.
Awesome. And just to also reiterate what Dave was saying, I think our focus really was body cameras, and right now that's on a little bit of a hold. We have the union, we have the sheriff, and I think if possible, our next kind of action item should be something that we want input from the sheriff, but it doesn't fall on him to ultimately do it, because his plate is pretty full. So again, that's why I was leaning like maybe it's citizen review panel where it falls more under the legislative body. But I think at the next meeting, once we have what all those action items are, knowing that the sheriff's working on the body camera policy with us, maybe the next item that this committee works on is something where we're getting input from the sheriff, but relying more on the legislative body for implementation. Just because, like he said, police reform is very important to him, but he has a whole list of things I'm sure that he's actively working on as well outside of police reform. So I like your idea, Rob, of, cutting this meeting short and not wasting time, and then letting the sheriff have the time he needs. And then we all look at the document Sherry's going to send out and decide kind of what's our next. Not that we're stopping on body camera. We're just kind of passing it off to the sheriff's office, the union. Pausing. And then, what is that next work plan look like? Dave?
Yeah, I just wanted to back that up and say it was nice of the new sheriff to really lay out earlier just what his list of things is to do. So that was a good reminder for me. So I think if we can sort of proceed with our priorities and maybe check off ones that are least burdensome to the new administration for a while, I think that would be ideal.
I think that's great, Dave, because I think Tistria had the same conversation. So I think we can definitely get doing that and checking some of these off. So we're meeting on the 23rd, Tistria, with Elena. Maybe that day you and I can spend some time, since we have to do that meeting anyway, and either before or after, maybe after, obviously, we can set some time aside. We could go down to the county if we're going to meet in person anyway. We could sit somewhere and then put something together, which will give us, 10, 12 days before the committee to get something out to everybody.
That sounds good. If we're in Hudson, I don't have to leave till 2, and that meeting's at 10. So I'll just block 10 to 2 off. It might not take that long, but that would be happy afternoon. Okay.
That's great. Ian Boehm. Oh, Sheriff, sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to, before we end the meeting, I just wanted to acknowledge all the work that everyone's done, and all the data I've gotten, and how important this is to everyone here on this panel. It's also very important for us here at the Sheriff's Office, and the undersheriff and I have talked, depthly, and we're looking to start some town hall style meetings too. So I know there's some supervisors that are here on the call today. If anyone's interested in getting a hold of the sheriff's office and setting something up with us to do a town hall meeting, just to talk about what the sheriff's office has to offer, and or any questions that they may have in any township, please reach out to us because we'd love to come out and talk to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sheriff.
Hey, Oswaldo, can you just check? We always say we're going to have any public input, and even though we're ending the meeting early, can you just check if anyone from the public had any input on the YouTube chat? Okay. Great. Well, thank you all so much, and thanks for being flexible and keeping 2 hours today open, of which we used a shorter amount, but I think next meeting will come ready to dig right in. So
Great. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al.
bye, guys.